In this video, I will show you what the design canvas is and how you can describe your electronics in it. After you've created a project, you can start with the design process. The first step of this process is achieved in the design canvas. This is the highest level of abstraction. Here you describe your electronic system with an intuitive high-level block diagram and block parameters using design blocks. First, you can specify your general settings of your design. This can be done by clicking on the gear icon on the right-hand side. Here you can edit general settings, such as the supply voltage, supply connector type, or the temperature range. After the boundary conditions for your system are set, you can start describing the functions of it by selecting the design blocks from the design library and dragging them into the canvas. In my project, my mini BMS should be able to measure the temperature of the battery. Therefore, I search for a temperature sensor block in the design library. You can either search for a block by scrolling through the library or through the search function, or with the filter. Once you have found the right design block, you can place it in the canvas. By clicking on the block and selecting the block settings, you can define its specifications. For the temperature sensor block, for example, you can set the minimum and maximum temperature which this sensor should be able to measure. It is important to note that this block does not describe a special sensor XY from the manufacturer YZ, but it describes the function measuring temperature. Besides this one temperature sensor, my mini BMS needs two analog input blocks to measure the voltage, another temperature sensor block, and a switch block as inputs. Based on these inputs and a logic, I want to control two LEDs. Four digital outputs, and a PWM signal. Between the input and output blocks, I place a controller block, which represents the controller logic between them. After you have placed all the relevant blocks in the canvas, you can connect them with each other by clicking on the input or output and dragging the connection to the desired destiny. Now the project can be saved. After you have saved the project successfully, you can trigger the hardware selection process through this play button. This process will take a few minutes depending on the project's size and complexity. The algorithm will now search through the database for modules that fulfill the described functions, interfaces, and boundary conditions, and will then select a combination accordingly. After the selection process is finished, two new canvases will be enabled, the hardware canvas and the BOM canvas, which will be the next steps in the design process.